Hi, this is Bob Adams. It's December of 2014. This year I decided I wanted to share with everybody my experiences of the Teton Dam disaster. At the time I was a paramedic with the Madison County Ambulance, and it was an episode that I will never forget. The video you're about to watch has several pictures and videos from my own library, but it also contains sources that are not mine of ownership or originality, but I do deeply appreciate them being available to share with the rest of the world of what that experience was like. Also included in this particular video is a couple of bonus things having to do with 2 world record CPR marathons that our ambulance crew had done and that we kind of originated and had a lot of fun with, including one with what we would consider to be a star of TV at that particular time, Kevin Tighe. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce this and enjoy. Rexburg, Idaho, June 5th, 1976. I got the call at home and couldn't hardly believe it. I had my wife Linda take Brett, our only child at the time, and make arrangements to move up the hill to stay with the E-boards, Don and Annette. My first priority was to get the ambulances and additional equipment up to the hospital. The ambulances were stationed in a shop next to the courthouse and in the flood path. I then took the smaller van ambulance and headed up the valley, using the sirens and PA system to warn others to get out. The news media had taken over the television and radio stations broadcasting the emergency, but there were still some that didn't believe it was possible. The fire department siren had been sounding forever, and most of the residents in Rexburg had gotten the message to head up the hill. As I listened to the public and emergency vans in the ambulance, I finally determined it was time to head back to the safety of the hospital hill. And just before turning up the road by the courthouse to the hospital, I could see a 5 to 6 foot wall of water at the far end of town heading in. There was a wall of dust billowing in front of it, and the sound was like a distant train, except for the breaking glass and walls from the buildings in its path. After parking the ambulance, I climbed up on the roof of the hospital and watched the destruction unfold. The front of the wave extended as far as I could see to the north of town, but I was more concerned if we had done enough to get everybody out of harm's way. From my vantage point, I could see the wave tossing cattle and horses end over end and knew they didn't have a chance. There were logs that became battering rams, and homes exploded when they hit them. Cars, trucks, semis, anything mobile just floated by like twigs. I could see homes floating towards town, occasionally running into trees or other buildings, then they would fold up from the constant water pressure. There began to be smoke coming from burning houses as gas and electricity ignited within the collapsing walls. As you can see here, lots of people got on the rooftops and watched the advancing wave of destruction. At that time, there were many manufactured homes that simply rose from their foundations and washed away. Many of the older homes made from stone remained steadfast until hit by heavy debris. The water level varied, but for the most part was 6 to 8 feet. You can see the smoke in the background as the water peaked. The crowds were shocked and just watched for the most part. There was plenty of help from private and public agencies to rescue and assist victims. Ricks College, now BYU, Idaho, became the central point for all rescue efforts, providing access to housing, food, and distribution of essentials like clothes. There was so much activity going on, I can't really do it justice in explaining what happened during that rest of that day. It was so wild, it was so crazy. As the evening went on and the water began to recede, I did manage to find somebody to give me a ride out to where our house was at. And I had to walk through a lot of water and total disaster area to finally get there, only to see that our home had moved approximately 5 feet off of its foundation. The garage door had been torn off and all the items that were stored inside were gone. The inside of the house was muddy. All the furniture had been tipped around and it was a mess. But the house was still there. The rest of the houses in the area had been manufactured homes that weren't bolted. Ours had been stick built, and they were all gone. So that was pretty much the conclusion of the first day. But what really began after that was the night. There was no electricity. There was, except for power that was being generated in individual areas. There was some places like the hill and the hospital, the college, that did have power. But the rest of the town and the upper valley was just as dark could be. In fact, a fellow worker called it being inside a cow's gut. It was so black. So in the morning when we awoke, we had our first opportunity to really see the damage. And I got a little short video here that kind of gives you an idea of what it looked like. It was pretty amazing. The first night I spent at the hospital, trying to make myself available to assist for any kind of overflow crowds, emergencies, or whatever. In the morning, I was informed that the Army Reserve had managed to push a lot of the debris off the road going to Sugar City. And I was asked if I would go up there with a small ambulance and open up a first aid station. So I loaded up the ambulance with tetanus shots and medical supplies and lots of bottled water. And I got a volunteer to go with me, and we went up there right behind these huge plows that were pushing everything out of the way, and saw the destruction, the railroad track that was twisted like a macaroni, and finally got to the junior high. We went inside. Everything was just, a layer of mud on the floor inside the gymnasium. So we got some squeegees, and we squeegeed the mud out of the area and cleaned it up as best we could. Set up some tables and began to share the supplies that we had brought in as people were coming back into the town to get access to their homes and to start the awful job of cleanup. That night it got dark early. We also had brought some other supplies with us, some lanterns and a few other odds and ends. And so I found a mattress that somehow was still clean and threw it on the floor, and spent the second night there in Sugar City sleeping in the gymnasium. And then the next morning I got to go back up to the hill to get showered and get something to eat and see my family. I don't have any pictures of that, regrettably, but that's what happened. The college had become the central point for everything. Because it was summer, there was room for the refugees, and services were vital. Yes, that's us getting food. The following weeks are essentially a blur. Gratefully, my father came out and helped Ramrod and did most of the work to try to clean up and salvage what he could from our home. Linda was pregnant with Greg at the time, who was born a few months later, and had her hands full with Brett. And I was just so wrapped up in doing emergency work that we didn't really see each other very much during that time frame. There was a lot of incidents that happened. I can't even recollect them all. I can tell a couple of different things that did happen. The water had eroded a lot of the sewer systems in the town. And there was a time we were driving the ambulance to a certain incident or whatever, and the pavement gave out. And the whole back end of the ambulance just slammed down into the pavement. We couldn't pull it out. Finally, somebody with a deuce and a half big army truck came by and managed to pull us out of the hole. I also remember on the second day, as the water receded, there was a huge trout. I'm talking probably 8-10 pound trout thrashing around in the water as it was receding in the gutter, which was kind of interesting to see. The dead animals, that was amazing. The thousands, and I don't know how many possibly could have been, but the livestock loss was immense. And there were helicopters picking up these dead livestock and hauling them up to a spot way up in the back area, up in the farming area, and just putting those dead bodies in there, and that went on for weeks. And the smell of the decaying animals and the erosion of everything was overwhelming. But probably the biggest thing, the thing that had the greatest effect, and even today, almost 40 years later, you can still find the dust, the fine silt that seemed to infiltrate everything. And it had a particular odor. Once in a while, I can open up something that I have in my packages of things, of memories from that experience, and I can still smell it. Quite an event for that particular part. But the most amazing part also was the cleanup process. The number of people and services that came from other states, and I remember in particular Utah Power and Light sent every lineman and truck they had from Utah and other areas to come back up and start to restore and put power poles back up and run the energy out. And it took months to get everybody to get power back up and telephone back up. And then the people that came from states, and particularly from within the LDS church, we had people arriving in busloads to help do the cleanup, which was amazing. I also remember an experience where a guy was helping to clean out one of the buildings, slipped and broke his leg. And so we fixed him up at the hospital, and I packed him up in the small ambulance and ran him back down to his home in Heber, Utah. And it was quite late. We got there late, and they invited us to spend the night, so we did, and then we drove home. So the cleanup process was amazing. The fact that the experience had $1 billion worth of damage and the loss of life was so minimal. The records show 11. From what I recollect, there was only 4 people that actually died from drowning or directly from that particular incident. We had one accidental shooting. Somebody had a .44 Magnum pistol and shot himself in the thigh, severed the femoral artery, and died. We had one suicide, and the rest of them, I believe, were heart attacks. Quite an experience, quite an experience. I invite you to go back and research, take a look. It did make international news, and it was quite an event. So anyway, I'm going to close out this part of it and show you some of the cleanup pictures that are here, and then we're going to step into some of the other interesting things in the CPR marathons. Okay, now we get to talk about some fun stuff that we did. Early in my career with the Madison County Ambulance, I was one of 2 employees, full-time employees. I was making a whopping $500 a month, and we had a very limited budget. And so we were always coming up with ideas of how we can get more money to add to equipment to the ambulance services, and also to help teach people about CPR. CPR was really starting to come into the scene at that time, and so we were bound and determined to show people the value of it. And I taught probably 5,000-6,000 people CPR during my career there at Madison County Ambulance. And one of the ways that we came up with was to do a marathon. So we decided to do a 2-man CPR marathon. Now, also at that same time, I had worked with Jan Harrop and Don Eborn, who was also working on the ambulance with me, and helped set up the EMT program, or the start now of the emergency medical system trainings that are available up at BYU, Idaho. And so we had a vast resource of students that could help us participate in a 2-man CPR marathon. And what that looked like is we took mannequins and we would do 2-man CPR on those, and we would go out and solicit people to offer money for so many hours that we'd put in on each of these things. So these kids were out knocking on doors and getting all these commitments from people to help pay. And we'd have 3 people per hour. The purpose of one of them was to make sure there was no more than a 5-second break. One person would do mouth to mouth, the other would do the compressions. Well, we decided that we wanted to make this thing as big as possible, so we contacted the news, and they came out and did an interview. And so here is a copy of that interview, and please notice the young, handsome guy that they're interviewing. All right? All right.
5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2.
The state of Idaho has kind of set a goal. It's teaching 25% of the communities how to do CPR. But in our community, and I'm sure the other communities have found it, that when you say CPR, most people have no idea really what it is. And so this is one of the reasons we're doing the marathon, is to show people what CPR really is.
Are you going to involve people who come in the actual act itself?
Well, no, we're not. What we have is we have 2 other mannequins that we can let them practice on if they wish to practice. But the biggest reason we're trying to do this, we have people coming in who have already been certified in the CPR, and it gives them a chance to practice. But also, because we're going for a world record, we cannot allow more than a 5-second break during the complete 120 hours that we're doing it.
Now, this is going to take place until next Wednesday at noon, when the 120 hours will be up, and hopefully a lot more people will know cardiopulmonary resuscitation. This is John Hanks for TV8 News in Rexburg.
Now, since the 1974 marathon, we decided we would do another one. Most of the equipment had either been replaced by the government, or else we were looking to just enhance and increase our services and capabilities. And so we decided to do another one. And I have to give credit to Dave Hanna, who you'll see later on another picture that's in here, for coming up with the idea of contacting the stars from the show Emergency to see if they'd be willing to participate. Now, for most of you probably won't remember the show Emergency, but for us who were in the emergency field, it was the show to watch, because they were always bringing to the light new things and all kinds of drama, and it was exciting. So we decided to go ahead and see if it was a possibility. So we wrote letters to the agents for Kevin Tighe and Randy Mantooth. Randy was unavailable. He had another obligation, but we heard back that Kevin Tighe would be willing to come in and participate with us. So we set the date and sent a letter out to everybody and invited them to come. We had a dinner we decided to put together, being hosted at Ricks College, and our goal was to raise $10,000. And so we put this thing together and had a lot of fun. But what I want to do now is I want to show you, for those of you who do not remember the show Emergency, a little clip so you can see who Kevin Tighe is and the excitement that we had about having him come. there now. Wasn't that just so exciting? It was awesome for us to have him be willing to come and share. So we made arrangements for him and his girlfriend to fly in to Idaho Falls. We pick him up. We put him in a hotel there in town, and made arrangements to have everybody come. Now I have made a letter and sent out to all kinds of different sources and places to invite them to come. And so I'm going to show you briefly the letter and then some pictures from the event, and then we have one more news media interview with Kevin, and we'll go from there. The event was successful, and we had a great response from the community. Dave Hanna is the one on the right side of the picture here. And of course, then we had our picture taken with Kevin. His TV interview was the next day.
Do you do very much of this where you give a lot of your own time to come and be at volunteer things like this where they have marathons going on?
Whenever there's time, because I think it's real important. I think it's important that the community becomes aware of, of emergency medicine and just what it can do. And for instance, in Seattle, where we did a show, we filmed an emergency there about a month ago. About 65% of the people, know CPR, know how to perform CPR. It's the safest city in the country to have a heart attack in or have any difficulty in. And it's, I just hope a lot of the folks who are watching, come down here and give the marathon support, and also support their paramedic and their emergency program, their emergency medical program.
The marathon began at midnight Sunday night and will run through midnight Saturday. There are a few hours of voluntary CPR still open, and if interested, you must be certified in CPR. Just call the Madison County Fire Department at 356-4591. That's 356-4591. You're more than welcome to stop by the fire station at 26 North Center in Rexburg, and donations will be gratefully accepted. For the news from Rexburg, this is Chris Cork.
Well, Kevin stayed with us for a few more days, and we actually got to take him on a couple of ambulance calls. And it was fun to watch the people when they recognized, oh my gosh, it's Kevin Tighe, and looking around for cameras. It was a wonderful and great experience. Anyway, thanks for watching. I've been looking to do this for a long, long time. It's been almost 40 years since that particular event for the dam. And a lot of things, of course, are lost in memory, and pictures are gone or whatever, but I'm still grateful to be able to share it with you, and particularly the fun that we had doing the CPR marathons. So until next time or next life, we'll see you later.